Hi, I'm Marjorie Healy, and welcome to another episode of Behind the White Picket Fence, where life is both messy and beautiful. Today, we have Sasha Kern from Blissful Baby Sleep here to talk to us all about, you guessed it, sleep. Hi, Sasha, welcome.
Hi.
I just want to tell our listeners that Sasha and I both know each other. Sasha was a client of mine. That's how we met. She's also the mom of twins. In fact, one of my other podcasts that I just did was with another mom of twins. So we're really getting our voices heard. And yeah, so we kind of know each other both personally and professionally, and we have lots of wonderful conversations about all things parenthood. But today we are going to focus on sleep. So I think the best place to start today would be for you to tell our listeners, like, what does a sleep consultant do? Because that's a funny word for a lot of people. You are a sleep consultant, like what?
It is a very funny word. Yes. There's a lot of older people who don't know what that would be. Like grandparents would be like, what are you talking about, a sleep consultant? That didn't
Right.
exist in the day.
Well, and I think that's the same for parent coach. I remember being at a networking event, and an older gentleman saw my name tag and he said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm confused. What's a parent coach?" And because I think the generation before us wasn't inundated with information, and they didn't have the same challenges that we're having. There's a lot of different things that have changed in the realm of raising a family, and now we are looking for guidance and for help. And it's hard to find where to look and why to look and who to look for. So tell us what a sleep consultant does.
So I like to say a sleep consultant is a personal trainer for sleep in a way. So
Right?
basically, parents come to me because they're confused with all the information to help their baby sleep better. And I sort of get through all of that and design a plan for them so they can just follow one plan, do a set of things to help their baby sleep, and support them while they do it. So it
Right.
kind of takes all the noise out of it so that they can have some, basically having me coach them along the way.
Right. And by noise, because like I feel the same way, I call it quote unquote noise. You mean just like the different books on sleep, the different ways, because there's a million books on how
Yeah.
to get your baby or your toddler or your child to sleep well.
Exactly. There's a million different books, there's a million different blogs, there's a million different Instagram pages telling people what they should be doing to help your baby sleep. I like to say that like our parents had one book, right? Like they had Dr. Spock. That's all they had, right? And now we have not only just so many different ways to do it and approaches to do it, there's controversy about how to do it, and there's different camps. And so I find that parents are really, really confused. They say, okay, I want my baby to fall asleep independently. I want my baby to take better naps and sleep longer overnight. But this blog tells me I should do this method, and this book says I should do this. And they just can't make sense of which is right for them. And so a lot of times they end up doing all of them and then get totally confused because they're
trying just like a little bit of this and a little bit of that.
Exactly.
And trying to see like, oh, I wonder if I could. And I find that never works. Like I find when parents are looking for a strategy or an approach, sometimes the strategy they chose wasn't wrong, but they didn't either try it for long enough, or they kind of diverged or added in different methods to try to make a unique plan that had a million different components from different opinions they've heard or different things they've read. And I'm sure too, when they go to a baby drop-in group or they're gathering with extended family, everybody has something to say.
Totally.
Sleep.
Totally. And it's probably similar to what you do, is that the consistency is really the most important part of it. And so if you're picking, it's somewhat arbitrary what you choose to commit to, but if you're doing pieces from different things that aren't consistent, babies and children just don't react to that. They get confused and they're like, what's happening? What are we doing? And a lot of times the same thing, parents will say like, oh, well, I did this and it wasn't working for 2 days. So then I tried this, and then that wasn't working for 2 days. So then I tried that. And as adults, that's kind of how we think. But babies and toddlers are like, wait, what? What's happening? Why are we doing something new? Why, so they oftentimes don't give it enough time, and they don't, again, because of everything they're hearing or talking to friends about, they don't trust themselves to stick to something. And so most of my clients really are just like, I just need someone to tell me what I should do, how I should do it, and then make sure that we're on track. And they don't want to have to compile things themselves from different things.
Well, and often today, like there's two parents working in the home, right? So they're exhausted, they've got other responsibilities, and it's sort of like when you go to a fitness class. I just get to go to the class. I know I'm going to get a workout, but someone's going to tell me, when to start, when to stop, how much, which way, what the benefits are of this, why those are the benefits. I don't have to do that groundwork behind it. And you've obviously researched sleep, and you know a lot about it, and you've seen probably a million different methods, and all of your different clients probably heard a lot. So you're able to offer also some relativity to the problem of sleep. And and I'm having you on here today because I think sleep is number one. I think when people stop sleeping, you start to just lose your ability to manage your emotions, to parent in the way you want to parent in, to love your partner if you have a parenting partner the way you want to love your partner, to love yourself the way you want to love yourself. You're lost. Without sleep, I feel like you're quite lost.
Yeah. And so are babies and children. I think there's a sort of this feeling that part of the first year is just accepting that no one is going to have quality sleep, and that's parents and babies. And I think that we don't always realize how much babies need sleep too. And so, that's part of it too, is that, babies now with safe sleep methods that have come are amazing. They're like keeping our babies safe while they sleep, but it's an unnatural position for babies to sleep on their back with nothing around them. So they don't want to sleep as deeply as we did when we slept on our bellies, and our parents could put us in our crib on our bellies and we would fall asleep. And so a lot of parents are confused how to get their babies to sleep longer in this way, but also babies aren't getting the same amount of sleep and deep sleep, and they need it. That's basically their job, is to sleep and eat, right? They're sleeping, eating, and growing. And so, that's part of it too, is, because sometimes parents will think like, oh, I'm being selfish because I want to get sleep. And it's not just about the parents, the babies need sleep too. I'm sure you've talked to so many people where in older children, the lack of sleep is horrendous. And even like kindergarten teachers talk about it, how they come in exhausted. And so I think a lot of times we don't realize how much, they need so much more sleep than we do. And I think we take that for granted, right?
Yeah, or we, in our efforts to get them to sleep, and in all of our best intentions, we sometimes could be hindering the process. But you made a good point about the sleep rules, because I'm going to fully admit I'm not a great rule follower. And, I will say that I am a huge proponent of safe sleep. Don't get me wrong. When my kids went to bed, they were in a sleep sack. They slept on their backs, all those things. But in the daytime, I remember wanting to treat them and myself, and I would put them to sleep on their tummies in the family room where I could watch them, and they were safe, because I knew how much they, liked that position and slept better in that position. And sometimes while I'm a huge support of safe sleep, I sometimes felt like I was being robbed of a way to give my baby the best sleep, or my babies, being twins. Having twins, you start to do survival. I'm like, okay, on your tummy, we're tummy sleeping, and I'll watch. I will be here for you. But I sometimes do think, even in parenting, we get robbed by some of the things that were helpful to us, because society sort of put some strict rules, and for some of them are for good reason. Some of them I question. So what do you think of the sleep rules, and how do you think that affects parents?
I think that it's based off of science. It's definitely, these safe sleep rules are based off of, the best guesses that they have on how to keep them safe. And I think that they're great, except for the fact that we're not giving parents what to do with that, right? So we were
Okay.
sort of like saying, okay, so you have to take them home. They can't be swaddled. They have to be on their back. There's nothing in their crib. And also they should sleep. And parents don't know what to do. So I
They're
have so
confused.
they're confused.
Yeah.
So and there's also not enough, I think there's not enough grace given to parents telling them, by the way, this isn't how they like to sleep. So if your baby doesn't sleep, like that's why, you know what I mean? Like, it's just kind of like, oh, well, what, like they should be able to do this, but just, it's not natural to them. They want to be cozy. They just got out of this really cozy place. They
Right.
don't want to be out and with nothing around them. And I think that that's where the disconnect is, that there's these rules, but there isn't a lot of conversation of how do we adjust to this so that, parents aren't feeling guilty. Or I get a lot of parents that are saying, oh, my baby will only sleep on me. And they feel bad about that because they've also been told that they shouldn't be on them for naps, or they shouldn't. And so finding that middle ground of like, the first thing I tell parents is like, you're given a bill of goods that's really challenging. And so,
Okay.
don't judge yourself or your baby that they want to be in the carrier for their naps. I mean, that's just natural for them, and that's okay. Because I think that there is this sort of gap in knowledge for people where they're like, okay, we can't put them on their belly, but then what do we do? How do we get them to sleep if we're not?
Yeah. And I
Right?
find the same too. Like, in
Mhm.
parenting, well, we're not allowed to do timeouts anymore. We're not allowed to do time
Yeah.
in. We're not allowed
Yeah.
to do this. We can't do this.
Totally.
But there's nothing out there
What do
that
we do?
what can you do? Right? There
Totally.
is a lot of verbiage of what we're not allowed to do. And then there's some shame around it. Do
Yes.
you find that with sleep? Like there's a
Yeah.
lot of, oh, you did that? Oh, that's a no. And
Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
thinking, okay, but I'm exhausted and I'm just trying to get some rest. So
Yeah.
what's a yes?
Yeah, exactly. You're right. There's a lot of don't do this, and not a lot of, you know, the reality of it, which is that babies like to be held, like, and that there's nothing wrong with that, and there's there's a lot, I mean, I even know there's been kind of, the pendulum has swung the other way. I have so many clients that co-sleep, which is what doctors and the Canadian Pediatric Society has been trying to get away from, but they can't get their babies to sleep other than to co-sleep. So it's almost gone to this other side. And then they can't tell their doctors that they're co-sleeping, because then they'll get in trouble because they're so it just creates kind of, there isn't enough open dialogue about it, because people, parents don't want to be told that they're doing something wrong. And I think that, my job is, I like to think of my job is to let people know that whatever they're doing that works for them is right for them, because every baby's different and every family's different. And, I think that we've gotten too much into telling parents like what is right and what is wrong. There's a lot of right and wrong. I get parents that are like embarrassed to tell me that they hold their babies for naps. And I'm like, I don't care. Like, you know what I mean? That's not for, like, I held my babies for naps. Like, I love holding my babies for naps, but they've been getting the messaging that, like, if you do that, you'll create bad habits. And if you create bad habits, your baby will never sleep. And, like, it's all very loaded, as opposed to, I think, again, 20-30 years ago, it's just like, oh, well, we just do it. We do, it works. And then
Right.
we'll
Oh
figure
my
it out
gosh,
from
my
there.
mom used to wrap us up and put us in a pram
Mhm.
outside in the cool air, because I think Dr. Spock said children like to
Yeah.
sleep outside. So
Yeah.
literally, and we lived in Ontario, so I know it was cold. I mean, and she bundled us up. I think there's photos of it. I was the last
Mhm.
born, so I don't really
Yeah.
remember this, but I'm sure I saw photos of the pram sitting outside the front door, and
Oh, yeah.
we probably slept quite well.
Totally. Yeah.
Great,
It's
but there wasn't a worry. I don't remember.
no.
I remember my mom was so confident in my childhood. I mean, she
Yeah.
still is. She still is my mom, but she led us with such confidence, and I think part of it was because there wasn't this list of do's and don'ts, and I don't think there was any real shame around it. Whereas today, I feel like you leave the hospital feeling, or however your baby was born.
Yeah.
Your baby's born, and whether the most you might get is a pamphlet if you're lucky. And
Yeah.
maybe if you are in the hospital, I think I remember someone showing me how to bath the baby.
Yeah.
But that's
That's
it.
it.
And then you're set free. And it's just this challenging time, and sleep is right off the bat, and you feel like you're trying to survive from every angle, from having to be this new mom to having just physically given birth, and having the physical elements of trying to recover from that. So, and then to, okay, right away, it's eat and sleep. And those are the two things that come up.
Yeah.
So, okay, so tell me this, well, I guess I want to know, the first question is, how do you just reassure them when they first come to you? When a mom or a dad first calls you, and I'm sure they're in some stage of panic or desperation, let's say, right? They're not going to call you if all's going well. They're calling you when everyone's, feeling desperate. What's the first thing, or what are some of the first things you tell them, just so that they can rest easy into, okay, we're going to get help. We're calling someone who has some background on this. But I'm asking you this because sometimes I have to get my parents to just, breathe before we can get into it. So what are the first few things you share with them?
I think the first thing is to let them know that what their baby is doing is just normal baby stuff, because I think every parent thinks that they have like this outlier baby who's still waking up at night or having a hard time settling. And I don't know if, I think part of that is because there's not a lot of sharing with parents of the struggle, but most of the parents that I talk to think that their baby is just like an outlier. And so the first thing to say, like, nope, they're totally doing everything that makes sense. And that, because usually, I actually don't think I've had a baby where it didn't make sense to me, because that's what I do day in, day out.
Right.
So that's kind of the first thing to say, is like, this is totally what to be expected.
Right.
There's nothing wrong, right? There's
nothing quote unquote wrong.
Exactly.
Right. Well, and I think you make a valid point, because while we'll probably get into a baby group and get a little kind of bee in our bonnet about what we think we should and shouldn't be doing, no one talks about some of the struggles. We don't often share that we haven't slept in months and we're exhausted.
Yeah, or just the people I find a lot of times the people who their babies are sleeping really well are the ones that tell parents. And then those parents are like, what's wrong with my baby? Why isn't my baby sleeping 12 hours at night?
Right.
And so
I know you have that mom.
Right?
I know we all have. Listen, I have a client, and I love her. She's amazing. And she said, my first baby was a dream baby. He slept, he ate. And I was looking around at the other moms thinking, oh my gosh, you're clearly not parenting properly, because my baby. And then her daughter was born, and she was given a totally different scenario, where there was screaming for hours and there wasn't eating. And you start to realize, like, not everything you do is a direct reflection of you. We have different temperaments. We're born into the world with with each different being. They're all unique, and they all have different challenges. But I guess what you're saying is that you haven't really heard anything that's so outside the norm. It is normal to have some non-sleepers over here.
100%. And most babies, have the same kind of things that are happening that are disrupting, that the parents come to me for, because that they're babies, right? So babies are beautiful, but they're not super complicated. Like they're that's what's beautiful about them, right? They're just, which when we have older kids, we're always like, oh gosh, wow, I wish that I missed those days where there weren't those like emotions that, like, it's just like, I'll cuddle you. So they're
I'll change your diaper, and this
totally.
Yes.
Totally.
Right.
They're very, very straightforward. And, as adults, we tend to put adult feelings onto babies a lot. So we think that there's something crazy going on. And, 9 times out of the 10, what's going on is that babies they're using a sleep prop, which is, if people don't know, it's anything that they have to have in order to go to sleep. So that's rocking to sleep, a soother, feeding to sleep, bouncing to sleep. I once had a wonderful twin mom who bounced her twins on a ball for every sleep, which so she wins the cake of that, because that is just like super. Yeah. So most babies that come to me, and toddlers, that's what's happening, is they're not falling asleep independently. And parents will sometimes think like, oh, well, that's, but why are they waking up overnight, or why are they doing this? And it seems, again, this is what I do. So I see it all the time. But when you're in it, you're like, this doesn't make sense to me. Why wouldn't they want to sleep these long stretches at night? Why wouldn't they want to take these long naps? So
Right.
the big part of that is explaining to them why this totally makes sense. If they're using sleep props, they're going to wake up overnight. And when they wake up overnight, they're going to think they need that sleep prop to go back to sleep. And so just explaining that this is totally makes sense, even though it doesn't feel like it does, can really help people, because it seems like it's completely random. And I think you've probably been there. I was there, where there's like a good night's sleep and you're like retracing the day. Like, okay, so what did I do? I had like this for lunch, and then we went out to the park, and then, and so there's a lot of that, right? Where we're trying to think like, okay, what did I do? How can I recreate it? And so much of it feels so random. And so the big thing is me saying, oh, this isn't random. Like, me looking at this totally makes sense. This is how we can resolve it. This is what we can do. And that's
and I have to say, I do have to comment on, you said, we're putting our adult emotions on our babies surrounding an issue such as sleep, but that carries through. I see that all the way through parenting, right through the teenage years. We put all of our emotion on our children. And one of the things I often invite parents to do is, let's just be our child's witness. We'll be their emotional witness, but we don't want to put our fear, for example, onto them. And we don't want to take their emotional feelings and adopt it as ours. I always use the analogy, we don't want to lock and load into the roller coaster, side by side, because when we lock and load into that roller coaster with our children, now we're on the ride. And how what they're feeling is what we're feeling, what we're feeling is what they're feeling. And that's not fair. They are not us. Right? They're a completely separate person.
Well, and like I tell my children all the time, I remind them that I'm the one with the fully developed brain, because you told me that. Yes. That's what you told me. They'll say why, and I'll say, because I'm the one with the fully developed brain.
Right. I know. Yeah.
Right? Like, it's just, they're not the same. And I think with babies, a lot of times, I find what's interesting is, as adults, we really like slow shifts. We like to ease into something. We don't like to do things drastically. And I think the biggest hurdle is understanding that babies are the total opposite, that they don't have any baggage, right? They have no baggage. They just got here. They're super flexible. Like, they'll do whatever, right? And that's a really hard piece for us as adults to understand, is like, oh wait, they don't have they don't remember being in 6th grade and having to change classrooms and it was super hard. Like, they don't have any of that. They're just looking for us to kind of guide them, and they are completely adaptable. And I think that's the biggest mind shift, is not like, okay, we have to do everything super gradually. Is like, oh no, they'll pick it up. Like, and because that's what they're doing every single day. They're learning something new, and I think that's my nanny years ago was saying, and it's kind of like this, when they were talking about shifting the rules for COVID. And she was like, well, all school is those structures and those changes. Like, that's what school is already. And the reason the kids were, they know they take their shoes off, they hang up their backpacks, they do these things. And like, it's kind of like that, where it's sort of like, we forget that as adults, we can just give them these structures, and those are the structures. They don't know any different, right?
What we're doing now.
That's what we're doing. Like, they didn't go to kindergarten putting their shoes in cubbies. Like, they learned, like, okay, this is what we do.
Yeah, so we're teaching them to sleep. We have to put the new in newborn, right? Or be reminded of the new in newborn, right? And they're not analyzing their emotions the same way we are.
No, gosh, how many times have we been like, our babies screamed at us for whatever reason, and then like wakes up from their nap and is like, hey, how's it going? Like, they're not holding on to anything. Like, if ever, like, the beauty of them is babies are 100% in the moment. Like, they're just 100% in the moment.
Which is so lovely. We need to capitalize on that. And exactly. Okay, so tell me this, what's your kind of, when someone shows up for you, how do you kind of meet them? Like, I know that sounds like a funny question, but I love when my clients show up and they are, they're like, Marjorie, the wheels are off the bus. We are calling you because we're done. It's chaotic. My son is helping himself to frozen waffles from the freezer. Someone just went and jammed my printer with some peanut butter, and we have no rules. Like the wheels are off the bus. And I always say to them, that's how I want you. I want you to show up with the wheels off the bus, because if they weren't off the bus, you wouldn't want to put them back on. There's this willingness piece. And I'm wondering, is that the same for sleep? Like, do you find your clients come to you and you kind of need them willing? You need them a little bit. You do need them a little bit desperate. Like, okay, because when we're desperate and when it's chaotic and when we're missing one of the pillars to health, which is sleep, we then say, okay, we're actually willing to do something, dedicate ourselves, commit ourselves to learning a new way to do this so that we can restore us collectively. So how are they showing up to you in similar ways? What are you finding?
Yeah, I'd say there's, sort of the wheels off the buses. I love that, because that is kind of, because people will say, well, what's the perfect time to do sleep training? And I always say when you're ready, because the number one thing is that willingness of the parents, again, because the babies will do whatever. So if it's, so I have the parents who come and it's just like, I like to say the wall, they've hit the proverbial wall. It's no longer sustainable. They can't keep doing it. And because, like you said, they're ready to have help. Like, it just comes down to having help. And I think sometimes when people reach out and it's because someone told them they have to, or they feel like they should, they're not as inclined to take that help. They kind of are still, thinking maybe they have the solutions or things are fine how they're now, right? So they're not as inclined to make the big changes. So I think I always tell parents when it's that, I always say, who cares what anybody else says? If it's working for you, keep doing what you're doing, right? Because, and I always say, my daughter Vivi didn't sleep through the night till she was past a year old, because it was fine for me, because I'd nurse her to sleep. She'd wake up once, we'd cuddle, she'd go back to sleep. I could nap during the day. I only had one baby, and it was fine. Like, if somebody had said it was working for me, if someone had said, well, you have to sleep train, I would have said, you're crazy. This is totally fine right now. And so I think that's usually where I come from, is like, if it's working, just keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, we talk about survival a lot in parenthood, that, you can change. I often say this to parents, you can change anything in a couple of weeks' time. And you spoke to this earlier. It doesn't take a lot of time to shift gears. And if you are doing something that is keeping the family ship afloat, whether, that's something behavioral or whether that's sleep or whatever that is, and it's not, it's not not all wheels are off the bus. Maybe a couple of wheels are off the bus.
One's flat. Right?
Exactly. But you're surviving. And I say, well, that's okay. It's okay to sit in conscious survival. You're probably going to change it. Well, maybe you don't know this. You can change it whenever you're ready. But they just need, I think you touched on this. They're really coming to you for that support. Because it's not easy.
It's not. And I think that with any change in any part of our lives, we have to be wanting to change. And so any change that we're making, if we're not 100% invested in it, it's not going to work. It's not going to stick. Like, I always tell my clients always say, how often does this work? And I said, as long as the parents are committed, it always works. Like, they're just hands down, like that is the only denominator. Like, all babies can sleep well. It is literally, and I'm sure you say the same thing. It's like, it's literally, if you are committed, like,
you got this.
And so if you're not, the inverse is true, right? So if you're not committed, then, and I always say, like, and the thing is, if you're not committed, it's really not fair to anybody, right? Because you're going to be doing part of it. And it's like, and sleep training is hard. Like, it's usually has some crying, it has, and so, like, I'm always like, don't do it halfway, because that's just hard on everybody. Like, like, just, you can do it 2 months from now, 6 months from now, or never, if it never comes to that. But it's like,
well, okay. So that's an interesting point too. I mean, I often remind parents that, when you are having young kids and nobody's sleeping and no one's eating the way you want and no one's getting dressed on their own and no one's putting their shoes on at the front door, I say, I can promise you one thing. If you were to do nothing, by the time they turn 16, they will not leave your kitchen alone. They love your They will not leave the table. They'll just say, please keep feeding me. They will
Yeah,
not get out of bed. You'll be saying, you're wasting the day away, please
totally.
get up before noon, and they definitely won't want your help getting dressed.
Mhm.
So, and I know that's a drastic,
But it's true.
yeah, but it's kind of true that, at one point, if you did nothing, this would probably sort itself out. I mean, not to say it's the healthiest choice necessarily,
Mhm.
but it will probably sort itself out.
Or if it's, I do tell parents who are on the fence, I say, what can be helpful is to look 3 years down the line. So
Okay.
does this feel sustainable for you when
Mm,
they're 3 or they're 4? Because that can be a big shift, because what seems, doable at 6 months, holding your baby, when they're 4, you may not want to be having to lay with them all night, or you may, or it may. I've had lots of people saying like, oh, it probably is fine. Like and
okay.
so
Yeah.
kind of just, like, it, because people will say like, is it ever too late? I said, it's never too late. It's just, it becomes more challenging the older they get, because they have their own ideas about things.
For
So
who? For them or for you?
for us, right? Like they're fine. Like I always say, like, I'm like, they're fine regardless. They just have more ways to yell at you or complain about it, right? So like a 6-month-old baby is very different than a 4-year-old, because a 4-year-old can get up out of bed and follow you wherever you go around the house, right? So it's just logistically, it can be more challenging for you. But if you see yourself wanting to co-sleep, or having, being with and not having a problem, and for whatever reasons, like sometimes people are like, well, I work crazy hours, so like I do want to lay down with my children until
Right.
they fall asleep at night. Like there are personal reasons. So then it's like, it's okay. But then some parents are like, oh no, I don't want to do this for like 3 more years. And then we kind of chat like, okay, so then, like,
Yeah, so I can
for
walk them
18 months, let's get this straightened out.
Yeah.
You don't have to do it right now, but let's do it before, they're people in the sense of being able to have like arguments with you about it,
Before it
So
gets a little more challenging. Yeah.
yeah, and it's like any skill, right?
Yeah, so let's look at this. So now let's say you've got that client and you've got the client who's willing, you've got the client who's ready for their baby to fall asleep independently. You've got the client who's, feeling a little bit like, yeah, all my wheels are off my bus and I really need a good night's sleep, and so does my child. Sasha, help me, give me my bliss back from that blissful baby sleep. What are your methods? How do you help them? Because when we talked originally, you said, you've got a couple different methods, but I think they're similar with a twist. So can you explain to our listeners what that looks like?
Yeah, so I'd say 95% of the time I do something that's based off of sleep sense, which is usually referred to as the chair method,
Okay.
where, because we can't really get around crying for the most part when you're doing sleep training or sleep coaching, because if you're sort of intervening too much, you're solving the problem for them, right? So I like to say it's like a problem solving learning curve. So what I like to do is we shift the parent's role from putting the baby to sleep to offering them comfort and reassurance while they put themselves to sleep.
Okay.
So basically what I do is I have at bedtime and overnight, I have them up close, sitting in a chair next to the crib, offering comfort, picking them up, talking to them, and kind of letting them figure out how they want to fall asleep, but still there, basically to just say like, you've got this, I'm here, you're safe, everything's fine. And then as the days go on and the baby gets better at doing it, falling asleep, then the parents move their chair away, they ease off, less interaction. And that's kind of my middle ground, because I find that when people think about sleep, they think of these two polarizing
Mm,
things. There's either like
mhm.
right out where you leave your kid for 12 hours, or there's you have to be with them 110% until they fall asleep and you can't leave. And there's a lot
Right.
in the middle, right? So there's a lot in
Right.
the middle
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
we can give them space, right? So we can give them space to figure it out while still being there for them.
Right.
And that's usually what I do with most parents when the baby is using a lot of sleep props, is really, really dependent on them, because I don't like to yank the parent away really quickly. We kind of ease them away as the
Ease them
baby gets
out.
movements. Yeah.
Well, and I think you said something that's really important, and maybe we should touch on before we end this podcast is that there's going to be some crying, and
Yeah.
I think, well, I mean, I think it's important to touch that again, back to what I had said earlier about, not sharing and being their witness, not sharing that emotional state. I think it's hard for parents to listen to their children cry. It really pulls on those heartstrings, and it's challenging. But you and I know that there is some science behind crying, and maybe there's a debate here. I've definitely heard a lot. Again, I've heard a lot of different information, but just, everyone knows this podcast is about listening and sharing. And really my goal of this podcast is to start conversations. So I am not, we've always said this, we're not here to cast any hard feelings one way or another, but what are your thoughts on crying?
My thoughts on crying are, it is so hard for any of us to hear our children cry. I mean, babies, children, everything, right? And it's the number one fear that parents have about it. And it was my number one fear when I was helping Vivi learn how to sleep, was like, because innately we're like, we have to solve this problem. Like as parents, that's kind of what our gut, when there's a problem, we have to solve the problem, right?
Right.
Crying, as it, like, what I like to say, when it relates to learning something, there's a big difference between leaving them with no interaction and, again, sitting next to them while they solve a problem. And everybody's comfort level is different. Some people, they don't want to do that at all, and that's totally fine with me. Like again, for a year, like Vivi didn't cry to sleep, but there is for me, a really beautiful learning experience of letting our babies and children express those feelings, right? Like babies, I like to tell parents, crying is the only way babies have to communicate everything. Right? And once again, we tend to put our adult association on those emotions. So we just think bad. Like they're crying, it's bad, because like to us, if we're crying, that's bad. If we're screaming, that's bad. As opposed to, it's a range of things, right? So it can be discomfort. It can be being upset. It can be hungry, but it can also be frustrated. It can be, aggravated. It can be, I give the example of like, our babies and toddlers will cry when they yank for a cord and we won't let them have it. It doesn't mean that we're being mean to them because they're crying. They can't have the cord, right? So it's them expressing all of these emotions. And that's, what I really like to come from a place from is letting them know that's okay, right? That's totally okay. That being said, I do everything in the sleep plan to minimize that. So it's not, because people always think, oh, it's gonna be hours, we're gonna be there all night, they're gonna be crying. It's never that, because what I find, and this is what's beautiful about it, is the minute we're sort of there and present, they get mad for a little bit, but then they're like, oh, okay, I mean, I guess I'm cool. Like, this is fine, right? They're not going, for hours and hours and hours. It's just like anything else. They don't know how, so say, for example, you've always bounced your baby to sleep and then transferred them into the crib. If you put them in awake, they're like, you're crazy. How am I supposed to do it? They literally do not know that they can just close their eyes. Like there's no part of their brain that understands I can just close my eyes. And so it's not that they're in distress. They're just like, what the heck? And I like to come from it to be like, fair. Like, you actually don't know that it's super, super simple because you've never done it. Exactly. So in that is going to be fussing, because they're trying to roll over, they're trying to get comfortable. And it's like any other skill that's frustrating. And I think I told this to you before. I like to say, like crawling, it's like they get frustrated when they're crawling. They get frustrated when they're learning how to roll over. We don't do it for them. We just encourage them while they figure it out. And so a lot of it is that, right?
Well, and I think we see those things as different things. You're right. It's how we view it. And really, when you think about it, if they're learning a new skill, regardless of what it is, they're also learning resilience. And it's something that we've forgotten to teach our children a lot along the way. That, you just haven't learned this yet, but you can. And, I'm sure you run up against this all the time, that a parent doesn't feel confident that they're capable to be the one to guide them to this new place because they're so worried they're doing it, quote unquote, incorrectly. Right.
Yeah. Or I find most of the time we underestimate our babies and our children, but our babies. And that's the number one thing that clients say to me is, oh, I totally underestimated what he could do. Like, it's just like because I think if it's a problem we can solve, we think we should solve, as opposed to I like to say, what a gift we're giving them to let them go through that frustration and solve the problem while being supported, right? Because that gives them ownership over sleep. Like, how frustrating must it be to be a tiny little person and you can't tell your big person that you're tired or how you want to go to sleep. Like, they're just fussing with you. They're doing what they think you need. And that's what I see time and again, is the babies are so happy to just have some agency of over, like, I can express I'm tired. They bring me to my bed. I get cozy. I go to sleep. And then I feel so much better when I wake up. Right. But we underestimate them all the time, that in what they're capable of doing. And I think that it's really, it's for me, it was a really amazing learning experience. And when I did it with Vivi, and that's kind of what I want to help my clients through, is like, what a gift we can give our kids if we want to let them know that these feelings aren't bad. These feelings are totally okay.
They're okay. But I think that's true all the way along. You know, I'm a parent and youth coach, and when I get a youth in my office, I'd say the first thing I uncover, and it's not a surprise, is that the parent who's, you know, given me the panicked phone call, oh, I really need my youth to come, or my child, my teenager to come and sit with you. They need help, they need a different voice, they need some guidance, and I'm so happy to do that. But I do, and I love my youth clients. They're amazing. Yet I'll say the first thing is that we've underestimated them. And the parent in that kind of phone call where they're asking for help has underestimated the capabilities of that youth, and they are quite capable. So I think that's something that if we kind of get a handle on, or get, you know, take some agency over early on, is trusting and seeing that, you know, this is a capable person, that they can do this, and
that just
confidence.
Yeah. And that just, which you know, I know you deal with a lot too, is that discomfort is not bad.
No.
Like, discomfort is good, right? Because then we know, you know, if we don't go through life with any discomfort, then as adults, we have no idea how to handle the discomfort that comes. So I think that, like, it's a really great opportunity to let them solve these problems, have that discomfort with us being close by and being a safe place, right? Which is exactly what you talk about with sitting next to them, is that, like, that's how they're going to learn in this safe way, as opposed to, you know, not ever having known that discomfort and thinking that it's a bad thing. And a lot of my clients, when I frame it that way, they're like, oh yeah, I don't want to give the message that crying means bad. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to tell them their feelings are scary, but we don't think of it that way, right? Because again, we're just kind of like, well, it must be awful, instead of like, they're a human being. And like, you know, I mean, how many times have we like come home from a super overwhilming day at work and felt like we just wanted to cry, right?
Sure.
Yeah, right? It's just like a lot.
Well,
right?
I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, what we learn through difficult times, or what I call an uncomfortable emotion, is that is new skills and new things about ourselves. And we also find out just how capable we are, and we can give that message from a really early age. We can, you know, through our own confidence as parents, but also through giving them the opportunity to feel a little bit of discomfort, and to find out that we can solve our own issues, right? Just you said it perfectly. We can close our own eyes. We are capable of closing our own eyes.
Exactly. We just don't know that we are, right? That's the thing. And when I tell parents that, I said, it's not they are not doing this because this is their preferred way. They're doing it because they do not know, they don't know they can sleep 12 hours. And trust me, once they know they can sleep 12 hours, they will want to sleep 12 hours, because sleep is amazing, right? Yeah. But they don't know, right? Like, we expect them to know something that, you know, again, like potty training, like, we don't give them a toilet. Like, they're, you know what I mean? Eventually they'll find a toilet somewhere, but we kind of have to show them, you know, that this is an option. And then it's and that's when all the babies, they just, once they realize how good sleep is, they just sleep. It's really nice. They just don't know. And fair enough. I always say, they don't know they're not supposed to be up every hour. They're babies. They just got here, right? Like, to them, it's super fun. They wake up, they see their person, they get some food. Like, what motivation is it for them to stop doing that when they don't, you know, they don't know the other option, right? They don't know the other option is nice.
That there's something else that's available to them that is so good for them and that they need.
Yeah, and that they'll enjoy, right? They're results based. Babies are just like, I always say to people, if your baby's waking up at night, there's something happening overnight that's entertaining. And so, because they're literally not that complicated. It's just like, it's fun when I wake up, or it's not fun when I wake up. Exactly. And if it's fun, they're going to wake up.
Exactly. Okay. So on that note, how do people find you? Where's the best place to go?
So my website is probably the best place to go because I have blissfulbabysleep.com, because I have a lot about me, but also if anybody wants to book a call, you just book a free 15-minute call on the website. So
Okay.
it's super easy.
So they
So
just get to chat with you just to check it
yes,
out, and it
yeah.
doesn't cost them anything.
Nothing, nothing.
Okay.
And I'm very honest. And if you do not need my help, I will tell you, you do not need my help. I do it all the time when I talk to parents. I'm like, I'm sorry, but you're actually doing great. So just keep doing what you're doing. So yeah,
Right.
that's the best. Instagram, you can follow me, but it's mostly just me being a mom.
Okay, well, that's good too. And so, okay, listeners, you can get a little bit of Sasha at blissfulbabysleep.com, and you
Yeah.
can connect with her for all things sleep. Thank you so much for coming
Thank
on.
you. Thank you,
And
Marjorie.
we'll definitely have you back on again to talk about all the fabulous things as kids get a little bit older around sleep and parenting, and just like the deeper conversations we've had on the principles of raising children. So
Yeah.
it was so great to have you. Thank you again,
Thank
and
you for having me.
I'll chat with you soon.
Okay.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.